said get up. That seat is mine now.
I'm sitting here, find another seat.
People like you shouldn't even be on this train!
I'm not moving. Do what you need to do.
You're pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. You smell like the street!
A seemingly harmless subway argument turned into the deadliest mistake one woman would ever make. Jessica Hartwell had no clue that the tired-looking man she had cruelly humiliated that afternoon wasn't just another passenger she could bully off a seat. Her ignorance cost her everything. What unfolded after that train ride wasn't just karma. You're about to hear how a few minutes of entitlement led to a tragedy so devastating that it took investigators 3 years to piece together the truth. By then, the damage was already carved into stone. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's a warning about the strangers we choose to disrespect. At this point, we want to say thank you for being here with us today. Your support keeps this channel alive, and we don't take that for granted. Now, before we get into what really happened on that train, we'd love to know where in the world are you watching from right now? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if this is your first time here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave a like. Trust us, you'll want to stay for this one. Vincent Moretti sat near the back of the subway car, his body slouched against the worn plastic seat. His clothes were faded and wrinkled, a gray jacket with frayed cuffs and jeans stained with what looked like years of wear. His face carried deep lines, the kind that came from decades of stress and sleepless nights. At 49 years old, he looked older than his age suggested. His eyes were half closed, as if he were dozing off, but anyone paying close attention would have noticed the sharpness behind them. He wasn't sleeping. He was watching. The train rumbled through the tunnel beneath Manhattan, the fluorescent lights flickering occasionally. Vincent had chosen this appearance deliberately. In his world, invisibility was survival. The less people knew about who he really was, the safer he remained. For years, he had built an empire that operated in shadows, controlling territories, moving product, settling disputes that never made it to court. His name carried weight in circles where power wasn't measured by titles or bank accounts, but by fear and loyalty. But today, he wasn't Vincent Moretti, the crime boss. He was just another face in the crowd, another tired soul riding the subway home. He preferred it that way. The chaos of his real life required moments like these, where he could sit unnoticed and unbothered. He adjusted his position slightly, leaning his head back against the window. The train slowed as it approached the next stop, brakes screeching against metal. The doors slid open with a mechanical hiss. A handful of passengers stepped off and a few more climbed on. Vincent didn't pay them much attention at first. Then she walked in. Jessica Hartwell stepped onto the subway car with the kind of confidence that demanded attention. She was in her mid-30s, dressed in a tailored blazer and heels that clicked against the floor with each step. Her blonde hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her expression carried a permanent look of irritation, as if the world owed her something it hadn't yet delivered. She scanned the car quickly, her eyes landing on the seats near the door. Most of them were occupied. A few passengers stood holding the overhead rails, swaying gently with the motion of the train. Jessica's gaze settled on Vincent. He sat alone, taking up a single seat near the entrance. To her, he looked like exactly what she expected, a homeless man, or, close to it, someone who didn't belong in her space, someone she could easily remove. She walked directly toward him, her heels striking the floor with purpose. Vincent didn't move. His eyes remained half-closed, his posture unchanged. Jessica stopped in front of him, her shadow falling across his lap. For a moment, she just stood there, waiting for him to notice her. When he didn't react, she cleared her throat loudly. Still nothing. Then she spoke. Her voice was sharp, cutting through the low hum of the train. She told him to get up, not asked. She said the seat was hers now, that he needed to move. Vincent opened his eyes slowly, lifting his head to look at her. His expression didn't change. He didn't argue, he didn't defend himself. He just stared at her, calm and unbothered. That only made her angrier. She raised her voice, louder this time, demanding that he stand up and find somewhere else to sit. A few passengers turned their heads, watching the scene unfold. No one said anything. No one intervened. They just watched. Jessica's frustration boiled over into something uglier. She leaned in closer, her voice dripping with contempt. She told Vincent that people like him shouldn't even be on the train. She said he smelled, that he was dirty, that he probably didn't have a home to go to anyway. Her words became sharper, more personal. She pointed at the color of his skin, suggesting that was reason enough for him to move. She called him names, labels meant to strip away his dignity in front of everyone watching. Vincent still didn't move. His face remained neutral, his hands resting calmly on his lap. He could have responded, he could have stood up and walked away. But something inside him registered every word, every insult, every ounce of disrespect she threw at him. He filed it away, storing it somewhere deep where anger lived quietly and patiently. The other passengers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. A woman near the middle of the car looked down at her phone, pretending not to hear. An older man by the window turned his gaze outside, watching the tunnel walls blur past. A teenager with headphones glanced over briefly, then looked away. Nobody wanted to get involved. This was New York. People minded their own business even when they knew something was wrong. Jessica continued her tirade for what felt like minutes, but was probably less than one. She mocked Vincent's appearance, his age, his silence. She told him he was pathetic, that he had no right to take up space that decent people needed. Her voice echoed through the car, filling the uncomfortable silence with venom. Finally, the train began to slow again. Another stop was approaching. Jessica straightened up, her point apparently made. She looked around at the other passengers as if expecting validation. No one met her eyes. The train came to a halt, and the doors opened. Jessica adjusted her blazer, gave Vincent one last disgusted look, and stepped off the train without another word. The doors closed behind her. The train lurched forward, continuing down the track. Vincent remained seated, his expression unchanged. But inside, something had shifted. The disrespect had been noted. The insult had been measured, and Vincent Moretti never forgot. The subway car continued its journey through the dark tunnels, the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks filling the silence Jessica had left behind. Vincent sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the spot where she had stood moments before. The other passengers slowly returned to their routines, checking their phones, reading newspapers, staring blankly at advertisements above the windows. The incident was already fading from their minds, just another uncomfortable moment on the subway that would be forgotten by dinner time. But Vincent wasn't forgetting. His breathing remained steady, his posture relaxed, but his mind was working through what had just happened with cold precision. He had spent decades in a world where respect was currency, where a man's reputation determined whether he lived or died. He had built his position by responding to disrespect swiftly and decisively. It was how he maintained control. It was how he survived. This woman had humiliated him publicly. She had stripped him of dignity in front of witnesses, treating him like garbage simply because of how he looked and the color of his skin. In his world, that kind of disrespect couldn't go unanswered. It wasn't about anger, it was about principle. It was about maintaining the order he had spent his entire life establishing. Vincent's mind began working through possibilities. He thought about the woman's face, her clothing, the way she carried herself. She lived in this neighborhood. That much was obvious. She had boarded at a local stop, and she clearly felt comfortable enough to act that way in public. Finding her wouldn't be difficult. He had resources, people who could track down information that most others couldn't access. A few phone calls, maybe some surveillance footage, and he would know everything he needed to know. The train pulled into a stop. Vincent stood slowly, adjusting his jacket as he made his way toward the doors. He stepped onto the platform and walked toward the exit, his movements unhurried. To anyone watching, he looked like just another tired man heading home after a long day. But inside, a plan was already forming. Jessica Hartwell had made her choice. Now Vincent would make his. What happened next would remind everyone in the neighborhood why his name was spoken in whispers. Sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones you never see coming. Within 24 hours, Vincent knew everything about Jessica Hartwell. Her full name, her address, her work schedule, the car she drove, even the grocery store she preferred. His network operated with the efficiency of a well-oiled machine. A phone call to his lieutenant, a few favors called in from people who owed him, and the information arrived like clockwork. Jessica lived in a townhouse 4 blocks from the subway station, a modest but well-maintained property in a neighborhood Vincent's organization had controlled for over a decade. She had a family, a husband named Robert who worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, 2 children, a daughter aged 12 and a son aged 9. They attended the local public school, walked the same route home every afternoon, and had dinner together most evenings around 7. Jessica worked part-time as an administrative assistant for a law office in Midtown. Her life followed a predictable pattern, the kind of routine that made surveillance almost unnecessary. Vincent reviewed the information in his apartment, a spacious unit overlooking the river that bore no resemblance to the image he had projected on the subway. The place was clean, minimalist, expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city skyline. He stood by the glass, holding a folder with Jessica's details, reading through it one more time. His face showed no emotion. This wasn't personal anymore. It was business. It was about sending a message that would echo through the neighborhood for years to come. He thought about the moment on the train, replaying her words in his mind. The way she had looked at him with such contempt, such certainty that she could treat him however she wanted without consequence. She had seen a vulnerable target and attacked without hesitation. She had no idea who she was dealing with. That ignorance would cost her more than she could have imagined. Vincent made another phone call. His voice was calm, measured, giving instructions with the precision of someone who had done this many times before. He wasn't ordering a simple warning or a message to scare her. This required something more permanent, something that would demonstrate the price of disrespect in his world. His crew understood. They had worked with him long enough to know when Vincent wanted something done. It needed to be done right. The plan was set in motion. All that remained was execution. Jessica Hartwell had roughly 2 weeks left of her normal life. After that, everything would change in ways she could never anticipate. Sometimes revenge isn't loud or immediate. Sometimes it's patient and thorough. 2 weeks passed with careful observation. Vincent's crew watched the Hartwell family from a distance, documenting their movements, identifying vulnerabilities, planning every detail. They noted when Robert left for work each morning, when the children walked to school, when Jessica ran her errands. The family had no security system, no guard dog, no reason to believe they were in danger. They lived their lives completely unaware that they had been marked. Vincent chose a Thursday evening. Robert would be home late from work, stuck in a meeting that ran past 9. The children would be in the house with Jessica, finishing homework, watching television, going through the familiar routine of a school night. The neighborhood would be quiet, most people already inside for the evening. His crew would have the time they needed to complete the task without interruption. 3 men arrived at the townhouse just after 8. They wore dark clothing, gloves, and moved with practiced silence. The front door lock took less than 30 seconds to bypass. They entered the house through the main entrance, their footsteps barely audible on the hardwood floor. Jessica was in the kitchen, preparing snacks for her children. She heard something, turned around, and froze. Her mouth opened to scream, but one of the men moved faster. What happened next was efficient and brutal. The crew had their orders. No witnesses, no survivors. This wasn't about interrogation or sending a message directly to Jessica before the end. This was about erasing her existence and everyone connected to her. The children were found in the living room. They didn't understand what was happening until it was too late. The sounds were muffled, contained within the walls of the townhouse. Jessica died last. She knew by then what had happened to her family. The crew made sure of it. She understood in those final moments that this wasn't random. Someone had sent them. Someone wanted her dead. But she never got the chance to understand why. She never made the connection back to the subway, to the tired-looking man she had humiliated without a second thought. Her last moments were filled with terror and confusion, questions that would never be answered. By the time Robert arrived home at 9:30, it was over. He opened the front door and stepped into a nightmare. The scene inside his house would haunt investigators for years. 4 bodies. No forced entry signs beyond the picked lock. No witnesses. No clear motive. Just a family erased in a single evening. The murders sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. Police arrived within minutes of Robert's frantic call, their sirens piercing the quiet streets. News vans followed shortly after, reporters setting up cameras outside the townhouse, broadcasting live updates to viewers across the city. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, whispering to each other, trying to make sense of what had happened. This was supposed to be a safe area, a place where families raised children without fear. Now that illusion was shattered. Detectives worked the scene for hours, collecting evidence, taking photographs, interviewing anyone who might have seen something. They found almost nothing useful. No fingerprints, no DNA, no security footage from nearby homes. The crew had been professional, leaving behind only the bodies and a husband who would spend the rest of his life asking why. Robert couldn't provide answers. His wife had no enemies that he knew of. No debts, no affairs, no reason for anyone to target their family. It made no sense. The investigation dragged on for months without progress. Detectives chased leads that went nowhere. They interviewed coworkers, family members, neighbors, anyone who had contact with the Hartwells. Every avenue ended in a dead end. The case grew cold, then colder. Eventually, it joined the stack of unsolved homicides that haunted the department. Another tragedy without justice. Vincent watched the news coverage from his apartment, his expression unreadable. He felt no remorse. In his world, this was simply the natural consequence of disrespect. Jessica had made her choice when she stepped onto that train and decided he was beneath her. She had gambled that her actions carried no weight, that she could humiliate a stranger without repercussion. She had been wrong. Life in the neighborhood continued. People moved on as they always did. The townhouse was eventually sold to a new family who knew nothing of its history. The media attention faded. Robert relocated to another state, unable to remain in a place that held so much pain. Vincent returned to his operations, managing his empire with the same cold efficiency he always had. But the police hadn't given up entirely. A young detective named Sarah Brennan kept the case file on her desk, reviewing it during slow periods, looking for connections others had missed. She interviewed witnesses again, went through evidence reports one more time, pulled surveillance footage from subway stations near the Hartwell home. She was searching for something, anything that might crack the case open. It would take time, but she was patient. And eventually, her persistence would pay off in ways no one expected. 3 years after the murders, Detective Brennan finally found her break. She had been reviewing subway surveillance footage from the week before the killings, looking for any unusual activity near the Hartwell residence. She noticed something she had overlooked before. A man matching Vincent's description had been on the same train as Jessica 2 weeks before her death. The footage was grainy, but there was an interaction between them. Jessica appeared to be yelling at the man, who remained seated and calm. Other passengers watched but didn't intervene. Brennan pulled more footage from that day, tracking the man after he left the train. His face became clearer in other camera angles. She ran it through facial recognition databases, cross-referenced it with known criminals in the area. Vincent Moretti's name appeared. His record was extensive but careful. Multiple arrests over the years, but few convictions. He was suspected of involvement in organized crime, but nothing had ever stuck. Until now. The pieces fell into place. The subway confrontation, the professional execution of the murders, the complete lack of evidence at the scene. This wasn't a random home invasion. It was a calculated hit ordered by someone with resources and connections. Brennan brought her findings to her captain, who authorized a full investigation into Vincent's activities. Wiretaps were established, surveillance teams deployed, informants pressed for information. Building a case took another 6 months. Vincent had been careful for decades, but the intensity of the investigation eventually uncovered enough evidence to move forward. Witness statements from the subway, phone records connecting him to known associates, financial transactions that didn't add up. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Arrest warrants were issued. Vincent was taken into custody on a Tuesday morning, surrounded by federal agents outside his apartment. He didn't resist. He knew this day might come eventually. The trial lasted 8 weeks, with prosecutors laying out the connection between the subway incident and the murders. The jury deliberated for 3 days before returning a guilty verdict on 4 counts of first-degree murder. Vincent was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole. But the verdict brought no one back. Jessica's children would never grow up. Her husband would never hold his family again. The damage was permanent, irreversible, carved into the lives of everyone touched by that night. Vincent's arrest was justice in the legal sense, but it couldn't undo what had been done. 4 innocent people had paid the ultimate price for one woman's moment of cruelty and one man's demand for respect. This story carries a lesson that goes beyond revenge or justice. It's about the weight of our actions, the unpredictability of the people we encounter, and the consequences that can spiral out of control from a single moment of disrespect. Jessica never imagined that the man she insulted on the train had the power to destroy everything she loved. Vincent never considered that his need for retribution would cost him his freedom and legacy. Both made choices that day. Both paid prices they never anticipated. So ask yourself this: when you interact with strangers, when you feel tempted to unleash your frustration on someone who seems powerless, do you ever stop to consider who they might really be? Do you think about the chain of events your words might set in motion? Jessica Hartwell didn't, and it cost her everything. If this story moved you or made you think differently about how we treat each other, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Do you think Vincent's arrest brought real justice, or was the damage already too far gone? And don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button if you want more true stories that make you question the world around us. Stay safe out there, and remember, kindness costs nothing, but cruelty can cost everything.